The tires of my truck crunched over the gravel road as I turned the final bend toward my cabin. The sun was just beginning to dip behind the trees, casting long shadows across the dirt path. I hadn't planned on coming back this weekend. I was supposed to be working 2 extra shifts in the city, but plans changed when my supervisor let me go early. A little voice in my head told me it would be nice to surprise myself with a quiet night at the cabin. No emails, no ringing phone, no deadlines, just peace. But the closer I got, the more I felt that strange itch in the back of my neck. It's that instinct that whispers when something doesn't sit right. The cabin came into view, and at first glance, everything seemed normal. The shutters were closed, the firewood stacked neatly, and the porch light was still off. But then I noticed something that made me slam my brakes halfway up the driveway. There was a car parked near the front steps. It wasn't mine. It wasn't my friend's. And it sure wasn't supposed to be there. A silver sedan. Clean, but with one of those little neighborhood watch stickers slapped on the bumper. My heart sank, because I knew exactly whose car that was. Karen. Karen was the self-appointed queen of the nearby HOA, even though my cabin wasn't even inside their jurisdiction. She'd made it her personal mission to stick her nose where it didn't belong. The woman had harassed me about unsightly firewood, about my overgrown driveway, even about the color of my cabin door once. And now, here she was. I pulled my truck slowly into the drive, killing the engine and listening. At first, silence. Then I heard faint footsteps inside my cabin. Inside. My pulse jumped. This wasn't a casual neighborly visit. Karen had gone into my home. I grabbed my phone, ready to dial 911, when I remembered something. Last week, Karen had been ranting at the general store about how she was keeping an eye on suspicious cabins. She'd probably convinced herself she had some imaginary right to inspect mine. I stayed quiet, easing out of the truck and moving toward the front door. Just then, a voice echoed from inside, sharp, bossy, unmistakable. Karen. Hello. This is Karen with the HOA, she barked, her heels clicking on my hardwood floors. If anyone's here, you need to know this property is not up to code. My jaw tightened. She had broken into my cabin, and was acting like it was her right. I pushed open the door with a firm shove. It creaked, and Karen's head whipped around. She froze for a split second, before her face twisted into that familiar scowl. What are you doing here? She demanded, hands on her hips like she was the owner. I couldn't help but laugh. Karen, this is my cabin. What are you doing here? She huffed, clearly caught, but unwilling to admit it. I had reports of suspicious activity. I thought maybe some squatters had taken over. I was protecting the neighborhood. Protecting it from what? My locked cabin. I shot back. Her cheeks flushed, but instead of apologizing, she doubled down. Well, now that you mention it, your property does look suspicious. You shouldn't just leave cabins unattended like this. It's a danger to the community. I pinched the bridge of my nose. She was unbelievable. Karen, I said slowly, trying not to lose my temper, you're trespassing. I could call the cops right now. Her eyes flickered nervously, but then she smirked. Oh, don't worry. I already did. My stomach dropped. You, what? Karen crossed her arms triumphantly. Yes. When I saw your truck pull up, I assumed you were one of the squatters. I called the sheriff's department. They'll be here any minute. I stared at her, trying to process the absurdity. She had broken into my cabin, accused me of being a squatter, and then called the police. But what Karen didn't know, what made my lips curl into a grin, was that someone else was already inside. Someone she hadn't seen yet. And when the cops arrived, they'd discover the truth in the most shocking way possible. Karen stood there like she was the sheriff of the whole county, chin lifted, hands firmly planted on her hips, completely ignoring the fact that she had broken into my cabin. "You heard me," she said, her voice dripping with smug satisfaction. "The sheriff's deputies are already on their way. You're going to have a lot of explaining to do." I almost laughed at the irony. Me? Explaining? She was the intruder here. But my grin faded when I heard a faint creak from the back hallway. Karen didn't seem to notice. She was too busy glaring at me like she'd just won some imaginary battle. That sound wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. That was a door closing. Someone else was here. I let my eyes drift past Karen, toward the back of the cabin. My old hunting cabin wasn't big, just one main room, a small kitchen, and 2 bedrooms. Anyone walking around inside couldn't stay hidden for long. Karen noticed my distracted gaze. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. I folded my arms, smirking again. "You'll find out soon enough." Her frown deepened. "Don't play games with me. I've already secured the situation. The authorities will handle this." "Secured?" I echoed, chuckling. "Karen, you broke into my house. You're trespassing, and you're about 30 seconds away from being embarrassed in front of half the sheriff's department." That was when a loud thud echoed from one of the bedrooms. Karen jumped, her smug look cracking into panic. "What was that?" I raised my brows. "Oh, didn't you know? You're not the only one trespassing tonight." Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked genuinely nervous. She took a cautious step back toward the door. "Why, you mean there's someone else?" I tilted my head toward the hallway. "Why don't you go check? You're the self-appointed HOA security, aren't you?" Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no sound came out. Then, in a shaky attempt to recover, she said, Well, if there is someone else, it only proves my point. This cabin is attracting squatters. It's unsafe." Before I could reply, the bedroom door swung open. Karen let out a little yelp. A tall figure stepped into the light of the living room. He wasn't some random squatter. He wasn't a thief either. It was my cousin, Mark. Karen blinked rapidly, clearly trying to make sense of it. Mark had a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, and his expression was halfway between surprise and annoyance. What's going on here?" he asked, looking between Karen and me. I exhaled slowly, relieved but also irritated. "Mark. I wasn't expecting you." Karen's face twisted in confusion. "Wait, you know him?" "Of course I know him," I said. "This is my cousin. He's been crashing here while fixing up his own place." Karen's face turned beet red. She opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, but no words came out. She'd walked straight into a mess of her own making, and now she was the one who looked ridiculous. Mark set his bag down and frowned at Karen. "Who's this?" I smirked. "This is Karen. HOA Karen. She thinks she owns the whole county." Mark chuckled under his breath, clearly amused. "Figures." Karen puffed out her chest, desperate to regain control. "Listen here, young man. I had every reason to suspect something illegal was happening here. And when the authorities arrive, they'll see I was right to investigate." I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Karen, when the authorities arrive, they'll see a homeowner, his invited cousin, and one trespassing busybody who broke into a private cabin." Her confidence faltered again. She glanced toward the window, as if hoping the deputies would pull up any second and save her from this embarrassment. Instead, The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock on the mantel. Karen licked her lips nervously. Well, I'll just explain everything. I'm sure the sheriff will understand. Mark raised an eyebrow at me, then whispered just loud enough for Karen to hear. Think they'll arrest her? Karen gasped. Arrest me? Don't be ridiculous. But her voice cracked. And that was when I saw the glow of headlights bouncing through the trees. The deputies were here. Karen straightened her blouse, smoothed her hair, and tried to look composed. But I could see her fingers trembling against her sides. She had no idea how badly this was about to blow up in her face. Red and blue lights flickered against the trees outside as the deputy's cruiser pulled into the gravel driveway. The crunch of tires on stone echoed like a drumbeat of justice. Karen's face lit up with relief, as if salvation had arrived. She straightened her shoulders, brushed invisible dust from her blouse, and positioned herself squarely in the center of the living room like she was preparing for a press conference. They'll understand, she muttered to herself, her lips curling into a smug smile. They'll see I was right all along. Mark chuckled low, leaning closer to me. She has no idea, does she? Not a clue, I whispered back. Moments later, 2 deputies stepped onto the porch. One was Sheriff Daniels himself, a broad-shouldered man with a no-nonsense scowl. The other was Deputy Lewis, younger but sharp-eyed. They pushed the door open, no knocking, since it was already ajar from Karen's dramatic entrance. Evening, Daniels said, his gaze sweeping across the room. We got a call about a trespasser. Karen jumped forward eagerly, pointing a finger at me. That's him. Right there. I caught him trying to squat in this cabin. He's been sneaking around here with that man, she gestured wildly at Mark, and I demand you remove them immediately. For a long moment, silence filled the cabin. Daniels tilted his head, his eyes narrowing. Then, slowly, he turned his gaze to me. This your place? He asked. I nodded calmly. Yes, sir. Been mine for years. Got the deed in the truck if you want to see it. Karen's jaw dropped. What? No. He's lying. This is a vacant property. Everyone knows that. Not vacant, I corrected smoothly. Just private. And last I checked, private means people like you aren't welcome to wander in. Deputy Lewis scribbled notes in his pad, glancing between us. How did you enter the property? Karen froze. Her lips twitched, searching for an answer. The door was open. I laughed outright. That's a lie. My locks are brand new. Want me to show you the splintered frame on the back door where she pried it open? Daniel's expression hardened. He took a slow step toward Karen. Did you force entry into this residence? Karen's voice climbed in pitch, teetering on the edge of hysteria. I had to. I was protecting the neighborhood. Everyone knows this cabin attracts trouble. Squatters, drifters, all sorts of unsavory types. Mark cut her off with a snort. Unsavory types. Lady, I'm his cousin. I've been here a week fixing pipes and clearing brush. The only trouble around here is you. The deputies exchanged a look. Daniel sighed heavily, rubbing his temple as though Karen's voice gave him a migraine. Karen, he said firmly, you've been warned before about sticking your nose where it doesn't belong. You do not have authority outside the HOA's jurisdiction. And this cabin is well outside it. Karen's face turned crimson. But I was doing my duty. Someone has to keep this area safe. Lewis stepped forward now, flipping his notepad shut. Breaking into private property isn't duty. It's a crime. You realize you could be charged with trespassing, maybe even burglary depending on the damage. Karen's jaw fell open. She stammered, her words tumbling over each other. Burglary. Me? Don't be ridiculous. I'm the victim here. He's dangerous. He laughed at me. That made Mark burst into laughter, doubling over and holding his stomach. Oh yeah, officer, cuff him. His laugh is a menace to society. Even Daniels cracked the faintest smirk before regaining composure. Karen's eyes darted toward the open door, as if she was considering making a run for it. But the cruiser blocked the driveway, and Daniels stood solid as a wall between her and freedom. I folded my arms, savoring the moment. So, Sheriff, what happens next? Because I'd really love to see how this plays out. Karen snapped her head toward me, eyes blazing. You think this is funny? You won't be laughing when I file a complaint with the county board. I'll have you thrown out of here. But her voice cracked halfway through, betraying the fear creeping in. Daniels exhaled slowly, shaking his head. Karen, you need to sit tight while we sort this out. You've caused enough ruckus already. She sputtered like a kettle on the verge of boiling over. This is outrageous. Completely outrageous. Yeah, Mark muttered, plopping onto the couch. Outrageous is one word for it. For the first time that night, I felt the tension in my chest ease. The tables had finally turned. Karen wasn't the accuser anymore, she was the one under the microscope. But what I didn't realize then, was that the night wasn't over yet. Because there was another surprise waiting inside the cabin. One that would leave Karen, and even the deputies, completely stunned. The tension in the cabin was thick enough to choke on. Karen paced in frantic little circles, muttering to herself about rights and duties, while Sheriff Daniels stood with his arms crossed, watching her like a hawk. Mark leaned back on the couch, arms sprawled wide, enjoying the show like it was a Friday night comedy. I stayed calm, though my mind was still circling the noise we'd heard earlier. Because here's the thing, Karen wasn't wrong about everything. There really was someone else in the cabin. And they were about to make their presence known. A soft creak echoed from the back hallway again. Everyone froze, Karen most of all. She spun toward the sound, her eyes wide, color draining from her face. What was that? She whispered. Daniels frowned. Who else is in here? I raised a hand. Before you jump to conclusions, this part is actually my doing. But I didn't expect them to still be here. Karen shrieked. See? I was right. There are squatters. But before she could spin another lie, the bedroom door opened. Out stepped a woman, mid-40s, with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. She wore plain clothes, but the badge clipped to her belt caught the light instantly. Evening, Sheriff, she said coolly, stepping into the living room. Daniels blinked. Agent Collins. What in the hell are you doing here? Karen's mouth dropped open, so wide I thought her jaw might hit the floor. Agent, she croaked. Collins gave her a flat look, then turned to Daniels. Part of an ongoing investigation. I was using this cabin as a temporary observation post. The owner, she nodded toward me, was kind enough to give permission. The room went dead silent. Karen's eyes darted between me, the agent, and the deputies like she was trying to compute a math equation that didn't add up. You what? She sputtered. I smiled faintly. Yeah, Karen. That's who you stumbled into when you broke in. Not squatters. Not criminals. A federal agent. Agent Collins folded her arms, pinning Karen with a stare that could peel paint. And from the look of it, you've interfered with my work. Do you know how serious that is? Karen staggered backward, her legs wobbling. I didn't know. I was just protecting the neighborhood. Daniels groaned, dragging a hand over his face. Karen, do you ever think before you act? Deputy Lewis looked like he was fighting not to laugh. Karen's voice rose to a squeak. You can't blame me. I didn't know she was here. I didn't know he owned the cabin. I was trying to help. Agent Collins stepped closer, her tone cold. You broke into a federal surveillance post. You compromised an active investigation. That's not helping, that's obstruction. Karen's knees buckled. She clutched at the back of a chair for balance, her face pale as chalk. Obstruction. Mark whistled low. Karen, you've really outdone yourself this time. I couldn't help but chuckle. All that nose poking, and look where it got you. Daniels finally snapped the cuffs off his belt. His voice was tired but firm. Karen, you're under arrest for trespassing, unlawful entry, and interfering with an investigation. The cuffs clicked around her wrists, before she even managed another excuse. Her shrill protests echoed as Daniels led her toward the cruiser. This is a mistake. I'll sue all of you. I demand a lawyer. I was protecting the community. But nobody paid her much attention. Not even the crickets outside. Mark leaned back with a grin, shaking his head. Man, I didn't think the night could get any better. But this is golden. Agent Collins gave me a small nod. Thanks for keeping your cool. We'll be moving our operation elsewhere, too much attention here now. But you handled yourself well. I shrugged. Honestly, I just wanted a quiet weekend at my cabin. Didn't think I'd be babysitting HOA Karen in handcuffs. That got a rare smile out of her before she slipped out into the night. As the cruiser's taillights faded down the road, taking Karen away, the cabin finally felt like mine again, quiet, steady, peaceful. Mark raised a beer from the cooler, cracking it open. To early returns, her. I clinked my bottle against his. And to Karen finally getting what she deserves. The fire crackled, the woods whispered, and for the first time in a long while, I actually felt at peace. Because Karen had called the cops on me. But guess who was really inside? A federal agent. And Karen had walked straight into her own downfall.